Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's the bright side, is not.
Thank you. Public comment. Mandy?
Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board of directors on any subject matter that is not on the meeting agenda and is within the board's subject matter jurisdiction. Public comment periods are limited to 3 minutes per person, and the total amount of time for public comment is 15 minutes. Persons participating by way of a video conference or teleconference shall ensure their audio is muted at all times, except when the board chair announces public comment periods. At those designated times, members of the public wishing to speak shall enable their audio and state their name for the record. When multiple members of the public wish to speak, the clerk will determine the order of speakers and announce their names accordingly. To ensure proper conduct, the board reserves the right to mute the audio and video of any members of the public violating generally accepted principles and decorum of official public meetings.
Thank you, Fallon. I didn't realize you were going to be reading that, so. All right, consent items.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Discussion items. Receive informational presentation, Reclamation District 10's completion of the recent elevated tow access corridor. Sammy.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. My name is Sammy Null. I am Yuba Water Agency's Flood Risk Reduction Manager. So today we have a presentation on the recently completed project by Tony Diaz. It was a project that this board approved for a grant back in February of 2019 and then amended twice since then for a total project cost of $3.35 million. So I just want to introduce Tony to come up and present the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy.
Everyone hear me? All right. Chairman Messick, members of the board, my name is Tony Diaz. I'm with MBK Engineers representing Reclamation District 10 as their consulting engineer. As Sammy mentioned, the water agency granted multiple times $3.35 million to Reclamation District 10 to construct a 2-mile tow access corridor along the Feather River East levee. The project is located along Feather River East levee, starting directly at the confluence of Simmerly Slough and then moving upstream along the landside tow, the Feather River East levee. The purpose of the project was actually a pilot study for broader scale potential implementation throughout the reclamation districts and LMAs in Yuba County. The idea was to determine a project cost for design and construction, and to potentially identify implementation challenges and to inform additional locations, firstly throughout Reclamation District 10. The details of the project, as I stated previously, was a 2-mile long access corridor to support operations and maintenance and flood flight patrols along the landside tow of the Feather River East levee. The design details themselves varied throughout the project location. The width of the corridor was approximately 10 to 15 feet. It was 2 feet thick, and it also included a 10 to 13 foot wide gravel roadway servicing at the top of the roadway. There were several design modifications throughout the project area to change the width to address potential landowner concerns and agricultural land use along the project. Additionally, it also provides a overburden benefit from a weight perspective to provide uplift protection during high water events and potentially move seepage paths away from the landside toe of the levee. Here's a typical design section that was completed for the project. You can see the thickness of the roadway. It's approximately 2 feet thick, and the typical width of the gravel roadway section varies from 10 to 15 feet. From a design and construction standpoint, there was a design contract that was issued to GEI Consultants, which started the design process in spring of 2020, which was completed approximately a year later in 2021. The design effort also required a minor alteration request approval from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, a initial study and mitigated negative declaration to satisfy secret requirements, as well as a 401 certification issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Along with the project, the Reclamation District had to complete 8 acquisitions along the project area, which took approximately a year and a half to complete, two and a half years to complete, rather. This included a permanent easement to support construction, as well as a temporary construction easement along the project. Construction was completed by Ariza Construction, which started in fall of 2023 and was substantially completed in spring of 2024. As Sammy mentioned, the total grant funding provided by Yuba Water Agency to Reclamation District 10 was $3.35 million. However, I wanted to summarize actual costs expended throughout the project. As you see here, the total project costs totaled $2.75 million. The design and permitting fees were just over $750,000. Legal support for an eminent domain proceeding was roughly $90,000. The total real estate acquisition costs were just over $270,000, as well as the total construction cost being $1.6 million. So in comparison to the original cost estimate, which was completed back in 2019, the original cost amount was $1.3 million. That was inclusive of both design and permitting and construction. As a few things happened to increase the project costs over that time, the total costs approximately doubled. From what we could see, the main cost drivers were construction and labor material cost increases, which resulted in an overall cost distance compared to the original estimate of about $1.5 million. So one of the items here, I think that if we're looking at a broader scale implementation of a tow access corridor throughout the different reclamation districts in the county, real estate acquisition stood out as the main challenge that was identified. The same things that we saw as a project team and as the reclamation district saw is that there should be a lengthier schedule or lengthier time allowed for the acquisition process. There was a fair bit of public outreach to the property owners throughout the county or throughout the project area. However, that took much longer than anticipated. One of the items that may be beneficial here is to acquire a larger project footprint than you potentially need to allow for design modifications in coordination with the landowners as well. One of the items that we also see is consideration of the adjacent land use and the existing land use that we saw here specific to orchards up and down the project area is the property owners do plant as many trees as they want to, as close or as many as they can, as close as they can to the levee. There were several property owners that we had to adjust the footprint of the project itself to account for the existing trees to minimize impacts to the property owners. More broadly as well, we also found that a sole implementation of a tow access corridor project outside of a larger scale project to address, say, seepage through the levee embankment may be challenging. This may be something to incorporate with a larger scale project like a seepage and or stability control project effectively as a component of that larger project. So show some pictures because obviously that makes a little more sense. So this is placement of the the import fill. This is the second lift. This was mid-project approximately. This is sheet foot roller compacting the import fill. This is near the downstream limit of the project at the confluence of Simmerly Slough. The project also placed an amount of bin blocks along this reach, as there's a lot of traffic from members of the public, so this will deter unwanted use of the levee embankment or access to the levee as well. There were also 2 pipe extensions that were required throughout the project. So this is one of the outfalls where an additional segment of pipe and a new concrete head wall and outfall was installed. And this is effectively the finished product. This is actually looking north upstream, and you can see the gravel travelway as well as the slope off to the east here on the right hand side of the photo. I guess I'll pause there if there's any questions on specifics.
Any questions from the board?
Through the chair.
Yep.
Are there any specific ordinances for traveling on the levee that allow the law enforcement agencies to ticket, tow anything they run across? Because I know down south we had an ordinance that went in and covered a specific area on the levee, but is this covered?
I believe it's a public safety ordinance, but I can verify. I don't know the specific code, but I think it would be a public safety access during. I don't know if they were talking about ticketing or towing. I mean, it is county authority to remove.
They don't pay
public
any
right-of-way.
attention. They don't pay any attention until you tow their vehicles.
Right.
So I have a question. Does that bring that section of the levee up to 200-year flood?
Substantially, no. It is not. So the intention was to support operations and maintenance along this area.
Okay. So it'll be for ongoing. It'll be access for ongoing work.
This is correct. Yes.
Okay.
When you talk about access, I believe most of the levees in District 10 are, you have an easement through them. The property owner would be very concerned if you all of a sudden let the public on top of the levees or on the access road, if all you have is an easement. Do you have any more information on that?
To clarify, it's not the access is specifically for Reclamation District 10 to complete their flood control and operations and maintenance requirements.
Yeah, not to general public.
This is correct. Yes.
Yeah. Do they plan on going further than 2 miles?
So at this time, there's funding that's not available to increase implementation. What I alluded to previously is that specific or a singular implementation of just the a tow access corridor would likely be better served with a broader scale project like installation or construction of a cutoff wall. So back in, not to kind of change the subject, but back in 2019, Yuba-Water funded a problem identification study for Reclamation District 10 to identify flood risk throughout the district. They identified 3 critical project reaches that Yuba-Water is funding District 10 to design and construct currently. As part of this project, when they reach implementation, this will be a portion of that design as well to construct an access corridor along the landside tow.
Through the chair. So I see the grant funding was $3.35 million and the project cost was $2.745. What's the remainder going to be used for?
The remainder is, there is no identifiable project, at least at this time. So there were several budget increase requests that were approved by Yuba-Water in 2021 and 2022 to complete the original project goal that just came in under budget.
So this is a reimbursable grant. We just pay their invoices as they come through. It just won't be paid. So the total cost of the project will be to 2.7.
Okay.
The rest will remain in our account.
Thank you.
In the priority list would be the seepage spots they've had. rather than access roads.
This is correct, yes. So there were technically 3 critical reaches that this limited problem identification report recommended first. There are 2 historic breaches from the late 30s that are included in those project designs, as well as a historic seepage site moving further upstream along the Feather River East levee. So yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the way I understand it, thanks, Tony, for this. This is great. You know, all of our protected areas are a little bit different. We'll talk about the urban areas around 784, much more public use simply because there's more houses around them. And that's always a challenge. Out in District 10, it's mostly rural agriculture, and it's kind of, in my mind, self-managed as far as, you know, the public access. So Director Vasquez asked about, you know, towing vehicles, and, you know, I'm thinking like code enforcement type towing vehicles and abandoned cars and such. You just don't see that out there because, you know, the farmers are on top of that stuff. So there's that. I think the primary purpose of this proof of concept or pilot project was District 10 didn't have, and still doesn't in many of the areas. It's something like 22 miles total, right? Yeah. District 10 levees. So we did 2 miles of access road. What District 10 doesn't have is a well-planned or well-maintained access road along the toe of the dry side of the levee. So if you had a significant event, you have limited manpower out in District 10. So, you know, you got a bunch of farmers and locals inspecting the levees, and it's difficult to get around. And then you have, you know, farm and ranch gates everywhere and all that. What this did is this showed that we can construct a, you know, an access corridor for inspections and get those inspections done quickly. We only did 10% of the total distance of the levee. And I think what we learned is, and this isn't Tony's conclusion, but I think what we're surmising here is, let's do these access roads, but let's do them as part of the upgrade projects as we move forward. We've kind of proved that it maybe isn't the most efficient to do them as standalone projects. As we identify areas where we're going to go improve sections of levee, let's do the access corridor there. But we also know basically what the cost is going to be, so we can have better cost estimates going forward. And to, you know, answer the question of, you know, level of protection, it is the goal to get the District 10 area up to a standard level of protection, whether it's 100-year, 200-year. We'll determine that based on the problem identification work. This here is just we're kind of probably more than dipping our toe into the water at District 10, but we're starting in District 10. District 10 is the rural part of the county, hasn't got all the attention that the urban part of the county has gotten. And now that 784 is up to 200-year level of protection, Marysville almost is that 200-year level of protection with projects identified and nearly complete. Now we move on to the rural areas, and this is kind of the first significant project completed in recent years at District 10. So that's kind of the overall. Tom and Tony, am I okay here? All right.
Yes.
There you go. And self-interest, the second picture is basically my backyard.
For now.
Currently in 2025. We'll see if John can help me get my building permits approved.
Through the chair.
Everybody wants to move to District 5. Go ahead.
I speak from experience on the levee breaches that people with off-road vehicles love to find some place that's out of the way and people don't have an ordinance. Therefore, nobody can react quickly, so we have to wait till we pass an ordinance for them to enforce it. It would be nice to just have that automatically put on there and possibly modified each time you lengthen that area so that if needed, the guys with the four-wheelers that love to put ruts in levees can be addressed. You go ahead and do it now. Thank you.
So I have a couple questions too. You're leaving those concrete blocks permanently? So that will reduce the access to people getting on that road and then getting onto the levee. I farmed the very first orchard north of town and then further up at West Ellis Road. And you're never going to get all those people out of there that handy. I mean, they take my tractor and they go pull themselves out and everything else. So it was like Willie said, it was more the farmers working with them. I went to the high school once and got all those kids that lived in District 10 together and told them, hey, you get stuck and take my tractor, at least put it back. even close. I mean, I have to put the mower back up, but I don't have to drive around for 2 hours and try to find my tractor. So
Yeah.
it's nearly impossible, especially in that
Nice
area.
to have an ordinance in place.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice to have an ordinance in place.
Officer High
think they
had a
already
lot
have
of
it.
fun
Yeah, I think they already have it.
doing that.
So that was my question, and I'm going to tell you, I noticed you spaced them apart. That will make Fish and Game happy because that allows the deer to walk through there because they're having trouble in Yuba City now where they didn't space them apart. There was no
Right.
deer access. Want to make that comment.
Huh? Thank you.
And then is there anybody from District 10 here?
No, not at the moment.
So that 22 miles, does that include both sides of District 10 or is,
Yeah, that's the
so it's
entire,
about half of it going up the Feather River side?
the majority is on the Feather River side. The levee
Yeah.
portion predominantly is the Feather River side. There's a high ground that reaches on the east side too, though it's not technically levied, but yes.
And I have a question that you can probably answer for me. I've always wondered this. We had an orchard there at West Ellis Road, and there was always a big hole there. Don Schrader told me that's where the levee broke in 1964, I believe. Is that true?
If it's the location I'm thinking of, yes, it is.
Okay. So is that an area that they're going to concentrate on?
Right. So at the moment, there's a design effort ongoing to address the seepage and stability concerns on that reach as well.
Yeah. Oh, my other comment was if, they patrol the levee, the District 10 guys patrol it. When they see a farmer taking an orchard out on the land side of the levee, wouldn't that be the time to approach them and go, hey, we need 15 or 20 feet?
Yes.
Let's get it now while they're
Right.
ripping an orchard out and not having to take trees out and
Yes,
kind of
that would-
get ahead of the game on that.
Yeah, that would be an opportune time to do something.
Could you relay that back to them? So,
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Comments? Anyone from the public?
I'll just say, Mandy just handed me a digital version of an ordinance that exists in the county about driving, stopping, parking on levees in Yuba County. So there is something that exists, I think, that may cover the concerns we've heard.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Managers report.
Okay, so we had a dry January, and then at the end of January, we got some significant atmospheric rivers. February was super wet, but it was high elevation snow, high elevation rain, so we had a bunch of inflow. Our Bullards is at 830,000 acre feet, which is 130% of normal to date, and there's been 640,000 acre feet of inflow, but I'll just say that we still just have an average snowpack in our watershed, which is good, and we have some storms upcoming. I would just say it's a really good water year, although kind of awkward, a wet end of November and wet December, super dry January and wet February. We'll see what the last couple months of the precipitation season brings, but right now we're in good shape. As far as power system revenue goes in January, we were basically in what we consider conservation mode in most of the month of January, where we're just meeting the accord minimum flows, trying to stack water up in Bullards. Then you get these atmospheric rivers coming in late January and into February, and unfortunately then we end up spilling that water. But that's our standard practice, is to conserve water before generating. So what that resulted in is we had a forecasted revenue, just energy revenue, of 5.7 million in January, and our actual was 2.3 million. And that's primarily in January a function of only 52,000 megawatt hours being generated, but also the market wasn't super hot either. So we kind of had a double whammy there. However, our other products, RA, carbon free, and REX, it was forecasted at 13.2 million and still came in at 12.6 million, which is really good. And RA basically carries that because RA isn't production dependent. It's just, fixed monthly price that we sold the product at. So all in all, January was decent, even with the lack of hydrology. So Power System Headquarters is coming along really well. I think the news there is we did get our PG&E power interconnection last Thursday. That was postponed from late January when it was too wet for those guys to get in there. I was nervous that it would continually get postponed, but we actually have our PG&E connection, so we are heated up with our, main service there at the power system headquarters. Another piece of information for you guys, might get questions about this when the construction starts. We're going to do some road work on the road across the dam. So the dam road, Marysville Road, as it goes across the dam, it's basically surface maintenance, but it's significant, and there will be traffic control, and that starts late this month and then goes through the month of April, probably weather dependent. There will be traffic control. So if you hear anybody saying, hey, what's going on the dam is in great shape. It's just the road surfacing maintenance. On Saturday, Ops got a call from the Army Corps at Englebright and said, hey, there's a loose boat that's heading its way towards the spillway. Englebright is spilling. We don't control all of that spill flow because a bunch of it's natural coming through the middle and South Yuba, but we do control Colgate's contribution. They asked us to decrease the Colgate outflow so that we would decrease spill to give them a better chance of retrieving the boat and get it tied back up. I guess that all occurred okay, but we did decrease the Colgate generation on Saturday at the Army Corps' request. It's kind of awkward because we are encroached into the flood pool at Bullard, so we're supposed to be full output at Colgate to keep Bullard's lower, but that's the Army Corps that controls that, right? The 170,000 acre feet of flood space, but it's also the Army Corps calling us and saying, hey, can you stop generating so we can, get this boat retrieved? So all of that worked out. It's just, if you get any questions about that, we had a little issue Army Corps had a little issue at Englebright on Saturday, but all went well. Yesterday, we shut down the Narrows 2 unit for its annual maintenance. It's kind of out of cycle. We normally do Narrows 2 annual maintenance in September as our irrigation and cord flows decrease, but because we have the big Colgate tunnel outage this fall, we wanted to get the Narrows 2 unit maintained, get that out of the way so we can focus this fall on the tunnel outage. So it's out right now. Kind of unfortunate because there's a bunch of volume of water coming through Englebright, but you plan this stuff, well in advance, months in advance, and it was on the books and it's in our annual schedule, and it'll make the tunnel outage go better, at least being able to focus on the Colgate units and the tunnel. Okay, so as far as our external communication goes, there's a lot here. I'm going to read it to you. I'll try to be dynamic and keep you interested. It's been a busy couple weeks of news coverage. The Appeal Democrat and CBS 13 had great coverage on the Hurricane Hunter flights from the Air Force that fly over the atmospheric rivers as part of our research partnership with Scripps. The CBS 13 story was picked up by many different outlets, including in nearby Monterey, Chico, and Reno, but even at stations all over the country in Indiana, Rhode Island, Washington, Texas, South Carolina, Colorado, Alabama, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Mississippi. Dee Dee warned me there's going to be a long list of states where we got coverage on that. It's great coverage. This is West Coast hurricane hunting, but it's atmospheric rivers, and we're a major part of it. So that's great coverage there. The Sierra Sun-Times and the Fox News affiliate in the Bay Area, as well as several other outlets, shared stories from a press release from the state about fish reintroduction program that CDFW is implementing in the North Yuba with our support. So I've reported on this in the past, and I think I reported on it back in October when the eggs were put in the river, but as part of our projects and agreement with CDFW and NIMS, we partnered with them to inject salmon eggs, not the salmon eggs you buy at the bait store, but actual viable salmon eggs into the gravels of the North Yuba River. We did that in late October. They hatched sometime in January. There is an RST, a rotary screw trap, in the North Yuba River, just call it between the Highway 49 bridge and Downeyville, where we're trying to sample or capture as many of the little hatchlings, whatever they're called. And we've caught something near 200 of them now. So this is the first time we've had anadromous salmonids in the North Yuba River since the construction of the original New Bullard's Bar in the 1920s. If you read CDFW's press release, they said that anadromous salmonids couldn't get to that reach since 1941 when Englebright was constructed. But in fact, that reach is upstream of the original Bullard. So this is, it's been about 100 years since those salmonids have been there. This is great success. This is just a little bit of science that we're learning from as part of our overall collaboration with CDFW and NIMS in combination with the Nature Like Fishway, the new fish screen, work we may be doing on the Hallwood Cordowa diversion, and this reintroduction program. This is great for salmon in the Yuba River, and I'll just remind everyone, this effort, this reintroduction in the North Yuba upstream of Bullards is managed by CDFW and NIMS. We're just a partner in it, but they're the leads. It's science-based. It really should be them leading it. I wanted to point that out. So that's great success. Let's see where I'm at here. The Sacramento Bee also wrote a detailed story about fish habitat efforts in the Yuba River, including the state's reintroduction program, the CEQA approval at our last board meeting for the Nature-like Fishway, and the positive results we're seeing from the Hallwood project. The appeal also covered our CEQA approval of the Fishway. A letter to the editor, the appeal Democrat basically asked if we were being responsible by having the reservoir at 80% capacity with so many storms still to come, which we took as a teaching opportunity and issued a response explaining our winter operations. And I think that's great. I think it's great that the public is interested in this, and I think it's great that it gives us an opportunity to explain how we operate. I'll also say that we can be a little more aggressive on how much water we store in Bullards now that we are unofficially, but in partnership with the Army Corps and others, operating under a forecast-informed reservoir operation scenario. Again, I say that's unofficially because our water control manual hasn't been officially modified or updated, but we talk to them daily during storms, but weekly during periods between storms. And 80%, if you think about 80% of Bullards, 80% is 800,000 feet, which is below our actual flood pool. So even at 80%, we have got all of our flood space available. So you have to look at kind of the concerns of the public and what's actually dedicated as flood space in New Bullards Bar as well. So I just wanted to point that out. California Water Daily News covered our grants to Cordova and BVID approved at the last board meeting. We were also briefly mentioned in a SACB story about the Sutter County Supervisor's discussion of a pay raise. We are planning a tour for Yes Charter Academy students to visit the new Power Systems facilities tomorrow. Upcoming sponsorships include the Yuba Gardens Pride Dinner on the 8th and the Farm Bureau's Spring Fling on the 14th. And our next regular board meeting is March 18th.
All right, thank you. Any questions? The manager's report? Nope. Okay, we'll go to director's reports. Andy?
Don't have a button here, but I would like to know where we stand on the code of conduct that we had discussed bringing forward. And I understand there's something in the works, and I also understand that there's possibly a lawsuit at some point in time. But where do we stand on the code of conduct?
Yeah, I can address the code of conduct policy preparation. Andrew and I actually talked about that yesterday. He's working on a draft currently. As we were asked to do in December, you asked us to put together a code of conduct policy. We didn't put a deadline on that, but Andrew's been working on it. And I think in the next few weeks, we'd have something to this board available for review.
Thank you. Rennie?
I just want to echo earlier statements to thank the people working on District 10's levee system, even if it's just for inspection at this point. Any progress we can make in the North County is very helpful. I know we don't have the population base to make it urgent or plead for federal money, but definitely any chance we get to help District 10, we appreciate it.
Seth? No report. Wayne?
I wanted to mention we had that great presentation on FERO from Dr. Ralph just recently, and I think the following week I read about layoffs in, I don't have any idea if that would affect them or not, but West Coast layoffs of people, federal people who may or may not work in that program. And I'm curious if we know anything. If not, should we ask and just get a feel for if that's affecting the progress on that research that we are involved in, and if it is having an effect, should we get involved in any lobbying to fix that?
So I'll address that. I'll just say, first off, there are definitely layoffs in federal agencies or groups that we work with. I'm going to do this broadly. It's not just, let's say, NOAA or NIMS or the Army Corps of Engineers. It's all of them. So I'll just address it as a federal agency. There have been layoffs directly related to the folks that we work with. It's too early to tell if it's going to have a significant impact on our operations. We will advocate that it doesn't, and we'll do whatever we need to do with our federal representatives in DC and others. But right now, we don't know what the direct impact is, but we're monitoring it, and we have those concerns. We have those concerns because, look, we have a Nature Like Fishway settlement we're working on where we need to work with the Army Corps of Engineers on permitting and land rights, and we need to work with NIMS on the regulation related to that. If those folks are being impacted, which I know directly NIMS is, I had a conversation with the NIMS manager I worked with last week, and there's a handful of folks on her staff that are no longer working there. So does that mean that that agreement takes longer? We don't really know at this point. We would absolutely have the same concern with the work we're doing with Scripps and NOAA on the atmospheric river studies. Again, it's too early to tell, but we'll monitor it and we'll do whatever we can to ensure that we're advocating for the essential folks that we work with.
I would like to speak in the affirmative that the agency should be complimented for helping Reclamation District 10. Granted, we don't have the population that you have from the levees below the town, but the District 10 was flooded in 1938 in the 55 flood, and then in the 87 flood, there were soft spots where they were worried about seepage. And those seepage spots could occur again at the same place. So I would urge us to keep trying to find ways to fund those, because the levee floods we've had since 55 have been not at the top of the levee. It has been failure from underneath the levees. Where in 55, both at Yuba City and Nicholas, the water went over the top of the levees to make them break. So the seepage under the levees is now the major cause of flooding. And we've done a tremendous job in both the city and the lower 784. And I think District 10 would be very pleased anytime you can help them.
Thank you. So Director Bradford is on his way back from NACO conference in Washington, D.C. Want everybody to know why he's not here today. He couldn't make his travel arrangements to be back in time for our meeting. So wanted to make that clear. And then I also want to add on the District 10 thing to Rennick and Charlie's deal. Although it's not very populated area, there is a lot of very large agricultural facilities in District 10 that would be devastated by a flood. Mariani, Shoei, there's or not Shoei, what's the other one? Mickey Orchards. Lots of really big prune drying facilities and prune storage facilities. So anything we can do to really help them with flood control would be great. Go ahead.
You can add a House and Whittlesey to that as well.
House and Whittlesey.
So three of you have made comments about the population in District 10, and then also, significant agricultural investment in District 10. So I just want to let the entire board know, yes, following the 97 flood, the 86 flood, then the 97 flood, we focused on the urban areas. And, it makes logical sense. We're trying to save lives, and that's where most of the people live. I don't want this to be characterized as we're neglecting District 10. That's just where we decided to focus our money. And remember, up until 2016, our funds were more limited than they are today. Just because it's sparsely populated or it's more rural agriculture doesn't mean there's not going to be some source of external funds. It's probably not going to be as high on the state or the federal government's priority list, but it doesn't mean we're not going to go after them. We're going to do everything we do in a rural area, in an urban area, we're going to do in this rural area. But I'll also remind you, after the 97 flood, we focused on 784 in Marysville. Those are nearly complete. Now we focus on the rural areas. District 10 is the biggest rural area with 22 miles of levee. It took 20 plus years to get 784 and Marysville up to a standard, let's call it 200 years. It's going to take time, but now that the agency has the financial ability that it has, we're going to do as much as we can there. And a lot of that work is going to depend on federal and state funds and partners, but We're not just doing a 2-mile tow access corridor and then sitting around and waiting. There's studies going on the weak spots, and we'll implement those as quickly as possible. I just don't want it to be thought of as, oh, not many people live there, so we're not going to do anything. That is not the case at all. And the agency has significant financial resources, so we may be able to do a greater percentage of investment in an area like District 10 than we did 20 years ago. So just wanted to make sure that's the direction I've received from this board, and that's what we're implementing in District 10. It's coming after the urban area.
Yeah. I'd just like to see District 10 get proactive, like I say, if they had all these real estate issues with people and guilty as charged planting right up to the road, right? So if we are monitoring when people are ripping orchards out to go get those easements then, or go pre-talk to I'm going to say the 11-mile stretch, I guess, along the Feather River is going to be the most critical one. And then the north levee on Cut Creek, because the railroad track levee doesn't ever get water against it, or very little.
I agree.
So,
can I make a funny?
sure.
You like to go to public board meetings. Let's you and I go to the next District 10 meeting.
All right.
Thanks, John.
I'll be there. Speaking of Spring Fling coming up, I will not be attending as a Yuba Water Agency member at our table. I will be at the bar bartending because Marysville Grad Night has one of the bars, and being as I have triplets graduating high school this year, I figured I better do my time in the
You're excused.
money raising end of things. And then on the 15th of March, we have the Color Me Run, 4-H run up at the UC Field Station, which is in my district and in our county and near our watershed, or part of our watershed, I guess, downstream of Narrows. But it's a really neat run walk. You get to see, the university field station, a lot of it. So I encourage everybody to join me in that. That's it. I did the Buckeye 5K. I made it.
If I could make one other comment, the Buckeye events of this past weekend, I made an observation that in the early 1850s, that Marysville had the second largest Chinese population in California, second only to San Francisco. And if you look back in the 1850s, the Chinese that came most from southern China not only built the railroads from Marysville up to Oregon, and then from Sacramento over the Sierras in both the 50s and then the 60s. And those two railroads could not have been built with the other labor that was available, because it wasn't. And we have a tie to that community, and I think that the Buckeye event was a great tribute to that tie.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Matthews. You gave a nice talk at the dinner Friday night. I enjoyed it. Some history. All right, with that, we are going to take, you guys want to take like a 5-minute break before we go to closed session? Good.
Definitely.
5-minute break, and then we're going to go into closed session.
Recording stopped.
Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.
Yuba-Sutter.live. It's the truth that comes through.